Hello and welcome back. Well, the Pontiac is officially off and on to new ownership. I wanted to take a few minutes in this video to just talk about documenting the car when it comes to the numbers. There's some numbers on the firewall. There's a number on the cal tag. I've got numbers on the block, the VIN number. I just want to go over those. I've had some requests to document the car. So in this episode, I'll just explain a lot of those numbers and what the motor codes are. And then I guess we'll get things cleaned up. I need to clean things up and get things organized for the new project. It's pretty exciting. So to document this car and the way it was built, these numbers are, from what I understand, the sequence build numbers of the block, and you can see there at the bottom it's actually A1. It's kind of hard to make out. A1, and I'll show you in the manual, depicts what size this engine is and how it was built from the manufacturer, or leastwise how it was intended to be built from the manufacturer, as well as what transmission would be mated to it. So these numbers on the block, this was the one that got me really excited when I finally found it after cleaning all the gunk off. That's the serial number to the car, 360K5024. That mates it to this exact body and chassis. So that's when I knew I had to rebuild this motor and not just grab the motor out of the parts car. Even though this had higher mileage on it, it rebuilt perfectly back to original standard specs. Even with 80,000, 90,000 miles, I don't remember which, I think it was 90,000 miles. Very little wear and tear on this other than the camshaft. The cam was worn, the bearings were worn, but cylinders look great. Everything was able to go back to stock specs. And here is the data plate. Most of the information on the data plate would be interior options, colors, exterior color, the trim 243 of the Ventura, paint. You can see the paint code LC. I'd have to look those up again too. We'll look at these numbers and get some data to back up what it all means. But you can see style 60-2337, body BK 1833, trim 243, paint LC, and then you've got the ACC, I believe, is an accessory. The JX would be an option. So it would be interesting to know what those options are and then what the 2 minus 2 means. So that VIN tag you'll see is 360K5024, which is exactly what we found on the engine block. Another interesting note you'll see, this is on the inside of the driver's door, which is 587. That number is actually written on the inside of the front fenders as well. And you'll see, which was really exciting to find when I cleaned up the firewall, 587 on the firewall. So my understanding is on those numbers, that indicates on the assembly line the numbers of this car when it was built. So it really doesn't fall into any of the sequence of the VIN number or the cal tag number. So it's probably just something on that manufacturing line that would tie all these parts together, the doors, the front fenders, the hood, the trunk lid. So those would have been just chalked in like we saw on the inside of that door. Here's the original chassis shop manual. When I first bought this car, I got online and was doing a lot of research, and I was really struggling finding the information about this engine and the way it should have been built from the factory, or what the specifications meant, or mainly I was looking for the code on the front of the block. I got onto the Pontiac websites and they really couldn't tell me a whole lot. There wasn't very many enthusiasts when it came to the 1960. Well, inside of this chassis manual is the spec sheet. This is the engine identification chart, so that the tinkerers, the backyard mechanic, as well as the actual shops could pull up the specs and know exactly what they were dealing with. So we've got the A1, which is the letter code that's on the front of the motor, the type of transmission, which is the MM, or HM, and then the model application. This would be the model number for each one of the models: Ventura, Catalina, Bonneville, which this engine would be standard in. And then as we go down the list, you can see the compression ratio and the piston. If we look at the second column over, you can see 10.25 to 1 compression. So it is the high compression engine. It's not as high as the 10.75 engines, which typically come with the tri-power, but it is much higher than the base 8.6 or 7.8 engines. Those were typically in the Catalinas and the lower end vehicle. So now going back to the next X, as we go up, you can see this engine typically came with a 2-barrel carburetor, and there is the size of the throttle bore, the 1 11/16. And then we can go over to the next category, which is the HM camshaft. So that is the cam that is a little higher than the stock camshaft, and it would be set up to work with the automatic transmission. If you got into the real high-end radical cam, they typically would only put that on a stick shift, the manual transmission. So getting down here to the last categories, we have the distributor model, and we have the AC 45 spark plug that would be used in this higher compression engine, and then the last one is the heavy duty starting motor. So that's something that would have been required for the higher compression in order to turn it over. So fun facts. Now we know how this was built from the factory. It wasn't factory built with a tri-power, but it's a great mate for this higher compression engine and the cam and the extra starter turning power. Pretty cool. So it kind of gives you the rest of the story. So one of the first things I did when I first started looking at the numbers on the Pontiac, especially on the engine, the A1 code, I got onto a couple of the Pontiac forums and posted what I had found, and then I looked up all the numbers that I could find on the intake manifold. And a lot of the guys that I kind of went back and forth through in these chat rooms or blogs or conversations online, the old timers were saying that was a common setup for somebody that would buy a Pontiac Ventura. The Ventura, fun fact, is about 6 inches shorter than the Bonnevilles. The Catalina and the Ventura shared the same platform. That's something that I had never known all the years I've seen these cars running around. And then the Ventura came stock with the 1 motor. That was a really popular setup for guys that wanted to go hot rodding and drag racing, to pull that 2-barrel intake manifold off, knowing that it had a high compression engine in it, and putting the tri-power setup on that car. A lot of times they were done just fresh out of the dealership, and some were even done at the dealership. So one of the things that the old guys, the old timers, were saying is, what are the codes on that intake manifold? Is it a 1960? And what I found out in looking at all the codes, it was actually a late 1959 intake manifold and carburetors, and the engine was built somewhere around March. Now, if a person was to order that car brand new and they wanted that to be set up as a dealer install, or they wanted to buy the tri-power off the shelf and install it themselves, it's pretty feasible that somebody would grab old inventory off the shelf and you would get a late 1959 intake manifold. So it's conceivable that this engine could have been set up that way from the beginning, or who knows, it could have just been added and turned up years later. It's hard to say. When the car was abandoned on the side of the road in Nevada, who knows what the history was before then. And all I know is the history over the last 30, 40 years has been sitting in a garage. Little information I got from the previous owner. But just more information that ties in. It was interesting to hear that from some of the old timers on the Pontiac website. So as you can see now, I have a big, dark, empty cave where there was a Pontiac that's been sitting here for 3 years. It's exciting that it's gone. At the same time, it's a little depressing. I did really like the car, but it didn't fit what I had planned. It was too big. I like cars that are very well restored or modified, like my Buick. So the car just didn't fit what my desires were, and I didn't want to go through a full restoration. So I need to clean this mess up before I can get my next project in here. My next project is a lot smaller. It's not really small, but it is smaller. It's really exciting. I'm excited for this new project. It's something that I had many, many years ago, and there's an opportunity for it to come back. So I'll touch on that on my next video. So for now, as you can see, I've got boxes stored up. The boxes I've kept for all the parts that I have behind this trailer. The pop-up trailer is hiding a whole bunch of Pontiac parts for my parts car. I got an engine and transmission under the workbench. I want to get all that stuff on eBay and get it sold. I sold the engine and transmission to the prior owner. He decided it'd probably be best to have that extra transmission and get it sent out to be rebuilt, because the transmission that's in the red car was leaking a lot. I replaced the pan gasket, I replaced all the seals, but there was a little seal to the linkage that was really leaking bad, and the only way is to take the whole transmission out and completely disassemble the bottom end of the motor to get into the back side of that to seal it. So having that other transmission is really going to help him to be able to get that corrected the way it should be. And while he's got that other transmission, you can go ahead and rebuild it. So like I said, I need to get all this cleaned up and get ready for the new project. I don't want to bore you with all those details, so let's just get it done. Voila! So much better. Now I'm ready for another project. So thanks for watching this episode of Ride Rescue and Garage Rescue. Really appreciate you tuning in. Stay tuned for the next episode. I'll be doing a few more things in the garage, as well as bringing in that secret car. So thanks again for watching. Appreciate it. If you like what I'm doing, give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please hit that subscribe button. Every little bit like that just helps me to keep building my channel. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you again next time.